Go ahead and get it started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Life Champ Podcast. For today's episode, we're going to be discussing Secrets to Body Language Part 2. This is going to be one that I would say is going to be very beneficial to the ones that need it. And I do want to refer to some of the podcasts that I had made in the past that are kind of on this similar topic. I would recommend episode 226, 227, and 228. 226 was The Untold Secrets of Communication. 227 was How to Communicate Confidence with Women. And 228 was Social Intelligence, What I've Learned. So these are going to be things that I've learned and have applied to my life, and they have given me much success when it comes to the social realm. And for today, we're going to be speaking a little bit more on body language. I'm going to be taking things that I had said from previous episodes and implementing it into this episode. So I hope you enjoy. So at the end of the day, what it comes down to it is this, right? I feel like in this world that we're living in right now, you obviously have people who are more, let's just say, more socially capable, more socially calibrated, and you have the people who are a little bit less socially calibrated, of course, right? And with that being said, we have all seen scenarios where someone isn't, let's just say, particularly in a good position socially. Maybe they're not able to read the room. Maybe maybe they act a certain way in public, and people view them as weird. Maybe they don't say that explicitly, but everybody in the room can kind of feel the energy that this person is being weird. And maybe, and you can even get a little bit more specific. Maybe it's a one-on-one interaction, and you can understand that you're doing things subtly, or this person's doing things subtly. And maybe let's just say you're trying to suggest to them a certain thing, and they can't get it, right? They don't understand it. They're not seeing it through your body language. Like for example, let's just say you're speaking, right? I'm speaking right now to you. Let's just say you're not attentive, so you're not gonna be looking at the screen as much. You're not gonna be paying attention. You're going to be, distracted. You're going to be thinking about other things. And essentially, what I'm trying to do with this episode is to get you to recognize the things that I observe that can really affect that social interaction. Okay, so in this episode, I hope to give you information as far as what to be aware of when it comes to interacting with people, as far as essentially all your social situations in which they can go, and obviously give you more information on that, as well as I want you to be able to understand that you are also giving out signals as well when it comes to body language that are going to suggest certain things, and it can be all telling. That's for sure. So I want to give you a little bit of a story. So a few months ago, I was in a social situation where I usually do this weekly thing where I get together with some of my friends and we go play volleyball. And usually there's new people involved. We have a lot of people that usually come and play with us. And there was a situation that had occurred, and let's just say I was on the receiving end of, let's just say, some backlash, right? This person didn't agree with how I played. Yeah, she really didn't like the way in which I played, which obviously, if you read the room, the environment of a competitive environment is going to be people who are aggressive, people who want to win, people who are going to do things in that specific way, right? They're going to be competitive, right? It's a competitive environment. People are going to be competitive. That's pretty obvious, right? Obviously, my name is Champ. I'm not trying to lose in anything. Obviously. And essentially, this person tried to communicate that I was not, essentially acting. I was acting out of, let's just say, I wasn't acting appropriate, or what she saw to be appropriate, right? And now I could have analyzed the situation and say maybe I'm in the wrong, or maybe this person is new and is not used to the environment, right? But either way, I could have taken it. I think it all can come back down to nonverbal communication. It can all come back down to body language. It can all come back down to a lot of different things. And essentially, what you should be trying to do is avoid yourself from being in as many awkward public predicaments as you possibly can. Nobody likes to be feeling a certain way that, rather, nobody likes to be feeling a negative way that they're socially incompetent, and nobody wants to also be on the receiving end of where everybody else understands what's going on except you, right? And essentially with the example that I had mentioned, with going to volleyball, essentially what I had perceived from the interaction was she was not keen to the understanding of this is going to be a competitive environment, and certain people are going to act certain ways. And that's something that I do want to mention, and I have mentioned before when it comes to just social situations in general, right? Sometimes people are going to point things out to you in subtle ways that are going to suggest certain things, right? And some of the times they can be right, they can be accurate. Their social observation can be right, and then there's going to be certain situations where it can also be wrong, right? When it comes to women, a lot of women are going to point out men's ignorance, men's, let's just say, lacking social calibration. This is what women do when they say, "Oh, I don't like you. You're not attractive." Or maybe they don't do this explicitly. Maybe they'll do it implicitly, or maybe they even will do it explicitly. But at the end of the day, you want to be aware of these things. You don't want to be in these predicaments, right? And what I will say is our body language, our facial expressions, and our hand gestures say a lot more about what we're up to than what we truly say. You can say you're confident. You can say you're capable, you can say all these things, but your body language, your facial expressions, your hand gestures will actually suggest whether these things are of the truth, or rather there is a conflicting point, right? There is a contradicting point in that. So these things for the most part don't lie, right? So when it comes to you putting yourself out into the environment, you must understand that you're going to be giving these things off anyways. So obviously you want to be as authentic and as genuine as you possibly can. You also want to be completely aware of what you're doing, and what you're doing can cause, right? And like I said, these things for the most part don't lie. So you can also observe them within other people as well, right? You can observe that people, they're going to be acting certain ways or doing certain things, and and hopefully with this episode you're going to be a little bit more keen to observing these things, right? And one thing I want to mention with this, with some of the information that I'm going to be talking about today, that I've learned not only through my experience, but I've heard other people talk about it as well, is there's certain things that I'm going to discuss on today's episode that are going to be somewhat nuanced, right? But are obviously still important to observe, so you can recognize whether this person is subtly suggesting or signaling something to you, right? So I think it's very, very important that you must understand that there's going to be certain environmental circumstances that might influence people's behaviors, and some of the things in which I'll say will apply, and some of the things I will let's just say it won't apply as effectively because of the environmental circumstances that can influence behavior. So I'm going to give you an example of one of these things, right? One of these things that I had learned is open hand or body language, right? So what that is let's just say me right now, right? You can see my palms, you can see I'm not hiding anything, right? And the complete opposite of that is me, let's just say, crossing my arms and being a little bit more closed off. Maybe I'm not making as much eye contact, I'm not as engaging, right? So these are the things that I would say are more of the open palm body language, right? And with these things, if you're expressing more open body language, people are going to be more likely to trust you. You're going to be probably looking and acting a little bit more expressive, and you're going to be more attentive in your demeanor towards other people. You're going to be a little bit more, let's just say, outward focused as opposed to inward focused, right? And then, like I had mentioned, right, the closed body language, that's obviously going to be the complete opposite, right? You're less likely to build trust. It's almost as if you have something to hide, you're going to be acting in certain ways, whether, like I said, you're conscious of it or not. You're going to be almost revealing or hiding yourself, or maybe you're kind of like a little bit more like closed in on yourself, right? And you're going to be a lot more inward focused as opposed to outward focused, right? And some of these things might look like crossed arms. Let's just say you're covering your crotch. This is something that I recognize within men, and specifically within women. If a woman's not really, let's just say she's a little bit more closed off, she's a little bit less trusting, she's going to put an arm on her stomach, and that is signaling a lot of things. Let's just say she's not comfortable. Same thing with men. If you see men, they get into a certain social predicament, you can tell whether they're feeling comfortable or whether they're not by their by reading their body language. If they have their hands in their lap, as opposed to their hands like me with on my chair, right? That's going to signal certain things, right? And getting back to what I was saying a little bit earlier with how your environment can play roles on your environment can influence your environmental circumstances can influence the behavior, right? And it can be a little bit misleading. So, for example, let's just say the room is cold. Obviously, more people, if let's just say they're not really dressed appropriate for heating up, they might cross their arms, and that does not necessarily suggest that they're particularly being, closed off, or they don't want to engage. Yes, that is going to be a symptom of somebody that has closed body language, but in the same breath, you must also take into account that there's going to be environmental circumstances that can influence the behavior. That being one of them. Or for example, let's just say you meet somebody for the first time. It's going to be there's this principle that I had heard, and I've seen a lot of people talk about, where essentially it's mirroring. So, for example, let's just say right now, right? I'm doing a podcast. You're seeing me, and some people view this as confrontational. Some people are going to view it as let's just say me being a little bit more open, a little bit more understanding. You're going to be able to see me. I'm not concealing anything, and that's going to convey certain things, right? You're going to perceive certain things, and it's going to convey certain things. Okay, of course. Um, another one of those nuanced things is it's also something to be said about how your brain reacts to it. So obviously we can acknowledge these things when it comes to the mirroring. We can acknowledge these things when it comes to facing, like I said, essentially basically facing or mirroring somebody. And let's just say somebody's in front of you just as I am in front of you right now. There's going to be certain things that are going to be a little bit different, right? So some of these times in your brain, in certain situations, that's going to be viewed as a little bit more confrontational. And in other cases, people are going to be comfortable with you. They're going to know who you are. They're going to know your intent. And then it's going to be completely okay, right? Same thing with, let's just say you're sitting next to somebody. Something that I have learned is people are more likely to be more open with you if they're not facing you. So let's just say we're in the same room, or let's just say we're going on a walk. You're going to be more likely. To expose or reveal a little bit more about yourself if you're not facing this person directly. So if you're going on a walk, because you're not necessarily paying attention to the micro expressions or the body language of somebody, that might influence your behavior to talk a little differently, right? So, like I said, right, you must understand that your environment is going to have some type of influence, and some of this information that I'm going to be discussing today is going to be a little bit nuanced, but stay with me, right? The first thing that I want to mention that I think is very, very important, something that I already mentioned a little bit earlier, when it comes to body language, is going to be the use of your hands, your hand gesturing, right? Using your hands is going to be an act of expression, right? So if you see people who are, let's just say, less expressive, they're going to tend to not use their hands as much. They're not going to be gesturing as much, right? And when I observe people who use their hand gestures, I feel like they're a little bit more convincing. I feel like those people tend to be a little bit more charismatic through their expressiveness, through using their hands to try to describe exactly what they're thinking, right? And obviously what they're trying to convey. And obviously all of these things are going to contribute to the understanding of the observer, right? People are going to observe or tend to see things a little bit more. Let's just say they're going to be able to understand things a little bit more because of your expressiveness. So if you're a person that doesn't really use your hand gestures that often, right? Let's just say you speak, maybe your hands are always in your pockets, or let's just say your hands are always, covering your crotch, or let's just say your arms are crossed, or let's just say your arms are behind your back. That's going to signal certain things, right? And I think it's very, very important to be aware of these things, right? When you go into social situations, you're going to need to be aware of what you're doing and what's that specifically signaling about you, right? So if you're a person that's not using their hand gestures, maybe that's something that you should encourage yourself to go ahead and do, and try to see if you can make it make sense and implement it into your own life, right? Into your own social interactions. And there's also some people who get made fun of by using too much hand gestures, right? I would love shout out to my mom, but my mom does this all the time. She's one of the few people that I've ever met that uses so many hand gestures that people always talk about it, because it's something that you can't. I'm not going to say you can't unsee, but it's something that it's so clearly obvious that this person is doing, right? So some people do it very, very subtly. Some people do it a little bit more. And you got to be able to, based on where you are, you need to be able to understand that you're either going to need to tone it down a bit, or you're going to need to raise it up a bit, right? So that's going to be very, very important, right? Hand gestures are going to be very, very important when it comes to social dynamics. Getting into the next one. This is one that I mentioned on a few different episodes, right? I wanted to lay down the groundworks for the open body language and obviously closed body language, but one I am also going to mention from a previous episode is going to be blink rate. So for example, let's just say you're watching TV, or let's just say you're watching a video, or let's just say you're at a concert. whether you notice it or not, you're going to be blinking less. You're more captured by what you're seeing. So you're going to not need to be able to blink as much as you would, as opposed to, let's just say, if you were distracted or you really didn't care about this, then you're going to be blinking a lot more, right? Typically, when you watch somebody or observe somebody, let's just say they're watching a game, right? They're watching a basketball game or whatever it is, they're watching a football game. If you pay attention to them, those people don't blink that much. They'll blink maybe three to four times per minute. Those people are locked in on whatever they're looking at, right? And this can obviously be something that you observe when it comes to how you view people when you're talking, right? You can see if they're attentive to what you have to say, and also in the same breath, you can also see if they're distracted, if they're thinking about other things, if they don't really care what you have to say. You're going to be able to see that through their eye contact, right? Obviously, eye contact's another one of these things when it comes to body language that really should go without saying, but that's something that you're going to need to be very, very conscious of as well. And here's the thing. One thing I want to say about this blink rate, because I do think it's important. Don't don't invest too much into this, right? I feel like there's certain people that would now hear this advice and not necessarily they would almost overemphasize it. They're going to be paying attention. They're going to be paying attention to it too vividly, right? So just notice if somebody's blinking more or blinking less. That's going to signal certain things, right? So if a person is blinking a lot less, this person is focused. This person is confident. This person is um essentially not in a high stress response, right? They're going to be less stressed out. And the people that are obviously blinking a lot more, that's going to signal the complete opposite, right? They're going to be less confident, or rather, they're going to at least appear less confident. They're going to be more anxious, as like I had mentioned, is going to be showing a little bit more of a high stress response, and that can say certain things as well. And like I said, don't put too much stake into it. Observe it. Try to adjust your behavior accordingly. If you're a person that is trying to capture the attention of people, and you see people looking away, or you see people blinking very, very often with what you have to say, slow it down. Because when you slow things down, now it'll allow people to re-engage and refocus into what you have to say. And now if you see their blink rate start to go down, you're in luck, right? You have now captured their attention. That's going to be very, very good. So these certain things are going to be very, very subtle, right? Communication in itself is something that is verbal and nonverbal, but people downplay the nonverbal communication, right? It's legit probably 70% of all communication, right? 30% obviously being verbal communication, right? You obviously want to hear what I have to say, but my energy in which I convey it with is going to say a lot more about what I'm up to than as opposed to what I'm saying, right? And you can also subtly see and feel certain things from certain people. Maybe they're going to be a little bit less trustworthy. Maybe they're going to be a little bit more trustworthy. You can tell within an energy. You can tell within observing and almost unconsciously being aware of somebody's body language. So these things that I'm talking about today, they're gonna be a little bit different. They're gonna be a little bit more for sure things that body language experts have actually talked about that has been researched, and you can look it up for yourself, right? If you don't believe me, if you don't believe what I have to say, either look it up yourself or go into the world and and try it out for yourself. And one thing I want to mention with this as well, certain things about seeing people change in their body language, essentially going back to what I had mentioned with the nuanced situations, right? With how your environment can play a role in your current state of your body language, right? I want to emphasize the point of you must understand people's nature as well, right? So let's just say certain people are going to have certain habits, and just as I do, we're going to have, let's just say, particularly negative habits about how we go about how we conduct our social self, right? And with this being said, if a person is, let's just say, blinking a lot more, maybe that's just like a tick that they have, right? This is just who they are. This is just how they socially convey themselves, right? That might not necessarily always suggest, oh, this person is in a high stress response, right? They're fearful, or um, they're less confident. Maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't, right? You must also understand that certain people are going to come packaged with certain things, and what you must pay attention to with those certain people is changes more particularly, right? So like I said, these things that I mentioned already can suggest certain things, but if they're like that from the beginning, or that's just their default mode of how they socially present themselves, then you must pay attention more vividly to what changes and yeah, essentially what changes, because that's going to say a lot more, right? If a person is, let's just say, their natural state is to be a lot more confident, to blink a lot less, right? To be more attentive and more focused, or maybe they're just more of a confident person. And then let's just say you start to engage within a conversation, and you can tell this conversation is making them slightly a little bit more uncomfortable, right? They become a little bit less confident. That change in their blink, in their blink rate, that change in their body language, that change in their hand placement or their arm placement, that's going to say a lot, because now you can see the change for what it is. You can see, oh, he was once acting like this, now he's acting like this. So I can pretty much conclude that this person is feeling this specific way, right? And then from there you can adjust, right? So let's just say, for example, you're talking to a woman, and you can see that maybe you're making her a little bit more uncomfortable, right? You're trying to engage, you're trying to be friendly and all this, and maybe it's a little bit intimidating for her. She places an arm um on her stomach, right? Essentially what that really means is she's obviously uncomfortable. She feels she's putting bones where there isn't bones, right? She's protecting her uterus. That's actually what it is. That's the actual response. Most people won't even consciously think of it like that, but when you really understand body language, that's exactly what it is. And that's something that you can kind of maybe lean back a little bit more, maybe not be so attentive or so engaged in the interaction, right? So and that potentially can change her body language and so on and so forth, right? But these certain things are going to be something that you need to be very, very keen and be very, very aware of, because there are certain people who can read these things and who act these specific ways without even needing to think consciously of them, right? I was a person, and I would say I'm a person who's very, very good at reading body language, and now learning more about body language, certain things start to make a little bit more sense. I start to understand why I feel the ways in which I feel. And at first I wasn't able to explain it, but now these things make sense, because now there is actual studies, or there is actual evidence that suggests that this makes sense. No wonder I feel this specific way. No wonder I can sense this person is feeling uncomfortable, right? So obviously you must adjust your behavior accordingly. Going back to the example that I had mentioned with the woman, right? Let's just say you were engaged, and you're like maybe like leaning a little bit forward, and you can see her, start to, her blink rate starts to go up, or let's just say she starts to, close her body language, or like she is less presentable, I'll say. With that being said, you can now begin to adjust your behavior and see if your behavior changes, to see if it might influence her behavior to change as well, right? And obviously, hopefully with these things hopefully with these things that I've mentioned, you're going to be aware of these things, and now you can take action in the moment, as opposed to reflecting after and saying, man, I wish I could have did this, or I wish I would have known that, or I wish I would have done something different, right? You're going to be able to do that in person, live, right? Live with yourself, live into your interactions, right? And that is going to be obviously plenty of utility for sure. If you're making somebody feel uncomfortable, you're going to know exactly what to do to make them feel a little bit more comfortable, right? Maybe you're going to back off, maybe you're going to lean back, and hopefully have them come forward, right? So that's something to be mindful of for sure. All right, and so there's going to be certain things that I mentioned on previous episodes. I want to mention again, because I think these things are interesting, right? So essentially, it's like this with body language and being able to read the room in general, right? I think it's very, very important to understand certain situations that can be clear examples of, let's just say, basically being able to read the room without people saying, hey, this is exactly what's going on, or maybe you're oblivious to the situation. Let's just say you were to tell a joke, right? And this joke is a little bit offensive, and maybe with your other friends it might have worked. Maybe you're in a new social circumstance, a new environment, and let's just say the joke doesn't go very well. People aren't laughing at your joke. Essentially, what they're trying to convey with them not laughing is that this is socially, let's just say, inappropriate, right? This doesn't exactly apply to the situation, and people are not exactly on your side, right? Obviously, you don't want to be in that predicament. And if you are in that predicament, let's just say that does happen to you. You make a joke, no one laughs, right? So you can have one of two conclusions. Number one, people don't understand your joke. Number two, you're not where you think you are, right? You're not where you think you are. You're not doing what you thought you were doing, which was trying to be funny, right? So those certain situations should hopefully be able to teach you certain things, and now you're able to adjust your behavior accordingly with the things that I've mentioned a little earlier. You can now begin to do certain things that's going to help the social lubrication of the situation, because obviously it was now in a tense point, and now you can begin to adjust accordingly, right? I want to kind of mention this as well. I think there's something to be said about this as well. Let's just say you're a person when it comes to your body language. Let's just say you know a lot about a subject, but let's just say your body language is still more closed off. Maybe you're a little less confident, and that lack of confidence is going to now play into your social perception, right? That you give off, right, with your body language. You can be a person who's very, very smart and lack socially and still lose the interaction, even though people who are very, very, let's just say, who are very much capable and competent in a certain field or certain realm, they typically would do good. If you're a person that's lacking the social aspect, let's just say you're technically brilliant, but you're lacking social brilliance, then people are going to view you as somebody who's still socially awkward, even though you're technically brilliant, right? So you want to avoid that situation as much as you possibly can, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us, right? And so you just got to know what to do with the situation that you're in, right? And hopefully, like I had mentioned, some of these things that I mentioned already, and now I'll get into a little bit more, but hopefully these things can most definitely help you out for sure. Another thing I want to mention as well, right, with the technical brilliance and the social brilliance, right? It is also very, very, you need to be very, very aware of what you're doing and how you're saying certain things, right? I'm sure you've seen women where they're like, "Oh, I agreed with what you had to say, but I just didn't like how it came off," right? And that's something that you must be aware of when you're speaking to a woman. Women respond a lot more to nonverbal cues of communication as opposed to verbal communication, right? Men are a little bit more neglectant of that. They're not really worried about your body language as much. Of course, to an extent, if it's like a first impression, then that's going to matter. But if it's something that has recurred over time, they're not really going to be paying attention nor care about your body language that much. But if you're with a woman, that's something that you must always be attentive to. That's something that you must always be aware of, right? They might hit you with it's not what you said, it's how you said it. Or it's not that you're wrong, I just didn't like the way that you said it, right? That's something that you need to be a lot more aware of, right? So maybe she partially is speaking to what you're saying verbally, but maybe she is also speaking to the way in which you conveyed it, right? Your tonality, your temperament when you discussed it, right? Like I said, let's just say you had more of a threatening body language, right? And obviously these things are going to be non-verbal, of course. And with that, hopefully, if you're in that predicament, you know how to adjust properly, right? A few more things that I want to mention that I think are very interesting when it comes to body language. Something that I learned recently, within the last month and a half, is this concept called UpTalk, right? And I'm sure you've had people who have talked about this or who've acted in this specific way. So, for example, they have a question inflection in the way in which they answer certain things. So let's just say, for example, this is going to be a poor example, but this is just going to be a quick one so you can kind of understand exactly what I'm saying. So let's just say you ask, "Hey, how's your day going?" And they say, "Good." And you can see like their tonality in which they ended their word or their answer was more of like a question or more high pitched. That's going to say certain things as well, right? Yeah, so with that being said, your voice tonality ends with a higher pitch of tonality. This might sound like you're questionable and less confident with how you answer and in what your answer is, right? You're going to seem a little bit more uncertain. You're going to seem a little less competent, right? And I would say, me particularly speaking, I would say I see this a lot more with women. And like I said, my example probably was a little bit poor, but I think that's something that you must be aware of is when somebody is acting or maybe it's you. Maybe it's you watching this. Maybe you have this question inflection. Maybe you have this raised frequency of tonality when it comes to your speech and the ways in which you answer things. Maybe you're going to people are not going to view you as confident. People are not going to view you as convincing. People are going to question you a little bit more. Maybe not explicitly, but implicitly they're going to question you a little bit more, right? Because of this uptalk, because of this question inflection in the way in which you answered or the way in which you responded, right? And that's something that I think people must be aware of. Or if you're doing this, or if you see somebody doing this, you must understand that that's going to be a social weakness, right? That's going to be something that's going to be less than ideal. And like I had mentioned before, everybody's going to have their social, let's just say, downfalls, right? They're going to have their own social moments or certain habits that they do that is specifically to them, right? Some people, they keep these things for their lives, and some people change them. Some people they want to improve their social skills, they want to improve their body language, they want to be able to convey a certain thing about their persona, and then obviously they'll make adjustments accordingly, right? Some people never learn about body language, and they never try to improve the ways in which they convey themselves to the world. And obviously that's something that I think is a little bit interesting, right? So if you're a person with some of these weaknesses that I've mentioned, right? Or maybe you convey a little less confidence, right? Switching these things is going to literally change the way in which you react. It's going to change the ways in which not only how the world sees you, but how you see the world, right? Let's just say you're a little bit less of a confident person and you start working on the open body language. You start to be attentive to these things. You start asking questions. You start understanding certain situations and how they make you feel, and you start to be very observant of how your body language changes or how it always is when it comes to presenting yourself to certain people. Let's just say you try to talk to women, and it for whatever reason it constantly doesn't go well. This is an issue a lot of men have, right? It constantly doesn't go well, right? The first thing you need to recognize is, yes, your intent might be right. You might say the right things, but you still might be not aligned non-verbally to exactly the way in which you think you're conveying yourself. So that might be the thing that is the issue for yourself, right? And I would say more often than not, it's probably going to be somewhat of the non-verbal cues, right? You're not conveying confidence, right? And if you're a person that is a little less confident, learn about confident body language, and then try almost have imposter syndrome. Try it out. Be somebody who you aren't, if that makes any sense, right? Try these things out. Try to act a little bit more open, right? Correct yourself when you start to see yourself closing off a little bit more, and then see how you feel. Because I would like to think that if you practice these things enough and they became habits, that would be your identity. That would be your persona. That'd be the way in which people see you. That is going to be the way in which people would treat you. And the byproduct of that is the reality that you would exist in, which is going to be a lot more of a confident reality. So, something to be mindful of for sure. Some of these people, like I had mentioned, right, they struggle socially, and most of the time people are going to be a little bit more unconscious about their own social cues and their presentation. And then there are some people who are aware completely. They're completely conscious of these things, their weaknesses, their struggles socially, and then they don't do anything at all, right? You don't want to be one of those people. Those people are living on autopilot, right? You don't want to be one of those people for damn sure, right? And I want to mention this as well, right? With the introverted extroverted conversation, because I feel like this can come up a lot when it comes to communication in general, and especially in nonverbal communication, right? For me, I was a person who, I guess you could say, I am extroverted by environmental circumstances. I would say for the most part, I am extroverted. But I'm only extroverted because I'm with people that I feel comfortable enough to be extroverted with, right? And I did have to learn a lot more ways in which I thought were ideal in terms of the human experience that were leaning a little bit more on the extroverted side. So I adjusted my behavior and changed some of my habits that I had, right? So the one difference that I think is very, very interesting, and maybe you view this as a little bit different, but this is what I personally believe, right? Introverts versus extroverts, right? The introverts are going to be a little bit more inward focused. They're going to be thinking about themselves, the ways in which people will think and feel about themselves. And that is going to be the complete opposite for extroverts. Extroverts are going to be a little bit more outward focused. And with that, right, there's going to be essentially consequences, good or bad, for both the introvert and the extrovert, right? If you're a person that is introverted, me personally, I don't view that as a strength to me, right? Socially, I just think that means to me you're socially incompetent. That's what it means to me, right? So even if you see yourself to be, or you claim the identity of being introverted, ask yourself if that's something that's truly worth being. that's truly worth reaping all the benefits that you want in the human experience. And if it's not, and like I said, for me, I wasn't necessarily super introverted, right? But I never wanted to be ways of an introvert, anyways. So, like I said, maybe you feel differently, but that's something that I would say to observe, right? People who are going to be a little bit more extroverted, they're going to act certain ways, right? People, more often than not, you're going to want to be like a lot of people who are extroverted, for the most part. Even if you're introverted, there's going to be a lot more people I believe to be a lot more extroverted, and those people, at least for me, are going to be a lot more aligned to exactly how I want to be myself. So something to be mindful of as well, right? Um, hmm. Yeah, so essentially all of your identity, all of your persona in general are nothing more than social habits, and you must be aware of them. Some of these things are going to be working within your favor, and some of these things are obviously clearly not going to be working within your favor. But nonetheless, be aware of these things. I believe they're going to be very beneficial to your development overall. And I do want to mention this as well, something that I mentioned a little bit earlier, right, with the technical brilliance versus the social brilliance, right? You want to be both. You don't want to just be one, right? You see, for example, there's going to be a lot of nerds out there who are technically brilliant. They know the ins and outs of their subject or their yeah, I'll just say subject, right? They know the ins and outs. They know everything to be. They know most things when it comes to um their subject that they're talking about, right? And obviously, you would think that that would convey confidence because it's competence. So of course, it should convey confidence. But some of those people obviously are not socially, let's just say, thriving in this world, right? They're not socially brilliant. They're not the most socially capable or the most socially calibrated people. And some of those people, even though they're technically brilliant, no one even gets to know that you're that smart. No one even gets to know that you're that capable or you're that competent because you're not even able to convey it. So I think while there is plenty of benefit to being technically brilliant, to know the ins and outs and to be completely competent, if you're not able to express that to other people, that's a good idea just for you. But if you want to be able to convey it to other people, and like I had mentioned, right, the best people in my opinion, people that I want to be like, they're both. They figured out a way to be both. Maybe they were people who were socially brilliant from the start, they were extroverted, very much so, and then they needed to learn how to become technically brilliant. And then they are both. And then obviously, like I mentioned, maybe the little bit of the inverse, right? The more extroverted people. Maybe you're more technically brilliant, then that social element is something that should never be neglected, something that you need to work on, right? Same thing with recognizing your strengths and weaknesses, right? Obviously, you should be working on your weaknesses, and of course, you should also be, revising and obviously still getting better in your strengths as well. But I think that's something to be mindful of for sure, right? And with that being said, if you're a person that's not socially brilliant, you can be right, you can have the right stance, you can have the most competence and the most um yeah, you could be right in an argument, right? But if you're not socially brilliant, you can still lose an argument to someone who is more socially brilliant, even if that person isn't as smart as you are or as technically brilliant as you are. So that's something that I want people to avoid. If you're introverted, that's something that you're going to need to be mindful of, right? You might lose to other people based off of not even because your argument's not as good. It's just you're not your ability. It all goes back down to your ability to convey whether your argument is good or not, right? So be mindful of that as well, because failing on the social front is something that I believe that should be something of the past. And obviously, as of right now, while with looking at the climate of the environment that we're in, it's looking like people are going to be struggling. Even though we're the most connected that we've ever been, obviously people are struggling socially more than ever. So hopefully, this is giving you some context, and hopefully, is giving you some ways and some skills and some things to think about, at least on the social front. But besides that, I'm gonna read some of these comments real quick, and then I'll go ahead and end it off. A person can be introverted yet learn to be extroverted through circumstance and experience. I 100% agree, right? You must understand, maybe you're an extroverted person, maybe you need to be a little bit more introverted. Maybe you don't need to go out as much or talk to as many people, right? Maybe you need to do more self work on yourself, right? And if you're introverted, maybe you have put in enough work when it comes to yourself, and maybe you need to show other people that maybe you want to engage with other people. Maybe you see utility in the potential engaging with other people, and maybe that's something they need to work on, right? You just got to know who you are. You got to know where you're at, and you got to move accordingly, right? So that's all I have to say for today's episode. This was episode 246 of the Life of Champ podcast, talking about more secrets to body language. Like I had mentioned, I'm going to refer back to the previous episodes that I thought were very, very interesting, very, very similar in topics, right? 2026, or 226, 227, and 228. Tap in with those for sure. Other than that, tap in with the next podcast that's going to be on Thursday, hopefully. And also tap in with the next live I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing that on Mondays. I'm going to be trying to go a lot more live on Mondays, so tap in with that for sure. But other than that, hopefully you learned something. Thank you for your time and attention. And I'll go ahead and end it off with the podcast motto. Welcome to the winning team. If you want to be coached by me, or if you want to join my community, go ahead and click the first link. That's going to be my school link. That's something that I have just started up. If you need any help in any capacity with questions, or let's just say you're in a certain situation that you're having problems in, feel free to reach out to me. That's something that I will be more than willing to help you out with, for sure. Other than that, like I said, tap in with the next podcast on Thursday. And like I said, welcome to the winning team. Hopefully you enjoyed. Y'all have a good night, man.